I'm Ian Anderson of JETHRO TULL, and you're watching MTV Brazil.
You started your career as a singer in some blues band.
Well, I actually started off being a guitar player. But,
First of all,
I was the only one who would sing at all. The other guys were even worse at singing than I was, so I ended up being the singer only because nobody else did any singing. But that was just for the first 3 or 4 years. I then switched to playing the flute. And
when have you started playing flute? Before you played guitar, or?
Actually, technically, I think when I was 20 years old, I started to play the flute.
Why did you decide to play the flute? Like, it was an easier instrument to go around on stage, or you liked the sound, or you had some influence?
Well, it was the easiest way of becoming the best player in rock music at that time, because there weren't any other flute players. Well, that's not true. There were actually 3, but they were just useless. There was a guy in Traffic, who was terrible, Chris Wood. He's dead now, anyway. There was a guy in Focus, a Dutch group, and they only had, I think, 1 hit. And then there was
that's a great
and then there was this unbelievably awful guy in the Moody Blues who could only play about 4 notes. And I was way ahead of him. I knew 6 or even 7 on a good night.
But is it an easy instrument to play? Or I don't think that's easy.
It is actually. It's one of the flute and the saxophone probably rank as the easiest, proper instruments to play. The easiest, much easier than difficult things like violins or cellos or French horns or even guitars.
Okay. I think that in 1967 there was a kind of boom of blues in England. How could you explain that? Why this kind of blues in England and these blues groups that you play?
Well, some very astute, very clever thinking promoters in Europe brought over the likes of Muddy Waters and Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, Sonny Boy Williams, all those guys actually came over to play in Europe. And in America, they were really just unknown, apart from to the black audience that would buy their records, relatively few. But in Europe, they became very, very popular. And of course, people like me, at the age of 15 or whatever as a schoolboy, I heard of and saw these guys play, started buying their records, and found it a lot more interesting as a music form than the kind of pop music that was available to us on radio and television.
At that time, only pop music. What kind of music it was?
Oh yeah, I mean it's back then all you saw on TV was really trashy pop music. I mean just music for children. Things, of course, are completely different now. Oh sure, it's exactly the same as it was then. It's full of bands who just have, one big record and then maybe a second record that's not quite so big, and then you never hear of them again. It's just the same now.
It's like
total rubbish, absolute rubbish.
I told a story in my program in this Classics. I told the story about John Evans' band.
Yeah.
That I know that you used to play that, and someone told me that the name of the band was because his mother gave the band a van to tour around. That's true?
That's true, yes. So we thought if we called the band after him, she would not only give us the van, but pay for the petrol as well, the gasoline.
And why had you have so many names, like the band? Like the Blade, the Navy Blue, why that? A lot of bands.
Well, because we were so bad in 1960, towards the end of 67, which was a very cold and hard winter in the south of England. We were so bad that the only way we could get rebooked into the clubs was to pretend to be someone different every week. So our agent would think of a new name every week, and so we had so many different.
And by
names.
the time the owner saw you,
that's right. When the Marquee Club decided that they liked us and they wanted us to have a residency, to play every 2 weeks or every week, then we had to keep the name we had, and that happened to be JETHRO TULL that week.
And JETHRO TULL, where?
I don't know. It was the guy in the agent's office who got the names. I think he took this one from a history book.
He made it a blow. Yeah.
It was the name of a real person, a historical figure.
Okay.
But it's just JETHRO TULL's not a great name for a band. I mean, it belongs to a real person, But it could have been worse, because I think the week before we were called Robin Hood, and I think we were going to be called Adolf Hitler the week later. So maybe it was just as well we got lucky there.
What about that first single that came, JETHRO TULL, T-O-E?
Well, I thought that it was a spelling mistake, but I have recently been told that in fact it was the intention of a producer called Derek Lawrence, who did the demo with us some months before, that he didn't like the name JETHRO TULL, so he intentionally changed it to JETHRO TULL to try and force us to change the name. But the record wasn't a success, so it didn't make any difference.
Talk about the past a bit more. I interviewed Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, and I asked him, how was your passage in JETHRO TULL? And he said just brief.
Very brief, that's right.
That was that.
No, Tony came for a kind of an audition. I mean, he just spent a day with us. We were just fooled around, and you know, he's a very nice guy, and he was a very talented guitar player in a particular style. But it wasn't the style that would have worked in JETHRO TULL.
Okay.
And so, you know, it wasn't. He was never a part of the band. All he did was came along to play with us just once to see if it was, you know, whether there was something there.
Was kind of an audition, or
not even as formal as an audition. Just we got together one afternoon. But Tony actually did appear with JETHRO TULL in the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus, a special television show the Stones made.
Eric Clapton.
Yeah, it was. And
Mitt Mitchell.
Well, that's right. But
I wasn't there, but
no, well, few of us were there, but it never got shown because shortly afterwards Brian Jones died. And the Stones, or particularly Mick Jagger, I think, didn't want to let this piece ever be shown. So the Stones even now refuse to allow the Rock and Roll Circus to be shown as a television show, even though it is a complete, I think, 1 hour or 2 hours.
Do they have it still, the tape?
Oh, it still exists, yeah.
And
but they won't allow it to be shown.
What about the change on the lineup of JETHRO TULL? Because like in '71, only you was the remaining as a regional member of the band. Why so many changes on lineup?
But realistically, I mean, Martin Barr has been in the group for as long as almost everybody remembers it. I mean, Martin joined at the end of 1968, after which we'd recorded before which we'd recorded one album. But by the end of '68, we were still only known really in the south of England. So Martin Barr's really kind of been there almost from the beginning. And
almost, yeah.
And almost, yes. So, and then Dave Pegg has been in the band for 13 years.
82, yeah.
No. He joined, I think, in either 78 or 79.
In the album?
You know, yeah, well, he joined actually before we did that. It was somewhere around 78 or 79, Dave Pegg joined. So he's been around sort of 13 years. Doan Perry's been in the band for 9 years.
Mick Abraham.
And he's the new boy. You know,
he's the new boy.
He's the new boy. He's been around for 9 years. So when you think of it in those terms, of course, it's we've had a lot of different people in the band, but you know, even Doan has been there longer than most bands survive. Oh, we have a keyboard player actually, Andy Giddings, who is this is his second year playing with JETHRO TULL. So he's actually the new boy. I have to mention Andy because his girlfriend made this jacket.
It's a nice jacket.
It's a very cheap jacket.
But it's nice.
Extraordinarily cheap. And in fact, it doesn't look too expensive either, does it?
No, it looks like, it looks different.
Yeah, it's actually it looks a little different, yeah.
What about Jeffrey Hammond? Why it took so long for him to join the band? Because there are 3 songs about him. Song I have here the names. Where is it? A song for Jeffrey. Jeffrey goes to Leicester Square. Why it took so? Were you a fan of him? Kind of a.
Well, looking back on it, I often wonder, did people think that Jeffrey was my special friend? Did they think that maybe, you know, Jeffrey and I had some special relationship? But in fact, no, Jeffrey and I knew each other at school, aged 15 or 16 years old. And Jeffrey was very briefly in a school band with me when we were 16.
Before JETHRO TULL?
Long before JETHRO TULL, yeah. And, but he went off to study art at college, and we met up again in London. And when Glenn Cornick left the group, we had no bass player, and it was around Christmas time, I think. And I called up Jeffrey and said, "I've got a Christmas present for you, Jeffrey." And he came over to my house, and it was we'd wrapped it up, and it was a bass guitar with a Marshall amplifier all wrapped up in paper.
Really?
He undid it and said, "What am I going to do with that?" I said, "Make some money, boy. Make some money. Pay me back later."
That's it.
So, yes, he had a month to learn to play bass guitar.
Oh, he didn't play it before.
Not so you would notice, no. No, he had a month to learn to play it. In fact, yes, a month later we were recording the Aqualung album, so he had to work pretty hard to learn.
Pretty hard, yeah. Where is he nowadays?
He's a painter again.
A painter?
Yeah.
Talking about religion, you had like My God, in 43, Aqualung, they talk about God and Jesus, kind of. What's your idea about religion?
Well, what I was singing about on those particular songs, I mean, not very well, I hasten to add. I mean, it was a rather naive sort of set of lyrics, but it was based on sentiments that I had when I was about, I guess, 13, 14 years old at school. And in some ways my views have not really changed very much, but perhaps the way in which I would express them might have become inevitably a little more sophisticated. But I mean, basically I believe in the great value of children growing up learning about not only one religion because it happens to be the religion of their parents or the society in which they live, but I think children should grow up and be encouraged to learn a little bit about many religions.
All of them, yeah.
It just comes back to what I was saying about tolerance and respect for other people and their views.
For sure. War Child. War Child was supposed to be a movie. Am I right? What happened?
I woke up in time because there was a terrible, I think around 73, 74, there was a lot of pressure on, not just on me, but on people in the more serious musicians. I mean, David Bowie and Mick Jagger and Elton John and Rod Stewart. I mean, everybody was getting approached to do movies because it was seen to be the natural extension of being a successful rock star. If you'd been around for 3 or 4 years and it looked like it was, you know, a real lasting success, then the pressure was on to do movies, the next step. And it was obviously not a great step because I don't think anybody has really been successful in crossing over into acting. I mean, there are many very funny films have been made, and lots of people have laughed at the performances of Mick Jagger and of David Bowie and so on. And really, and of course, even now, poor old Madonna is out there still, you know, beating her head against the wall, trying to make a movie that people will actually even say, it's okay. I mean, so far they hate everything she's done, you know. And I don't think you can really make that successful. The only people who've ever been successful are people who've been actors first and then have made then
became a musician.
Maybe got involved in music.
And Too Old to Rock and Roll, so we were talking about that. Too Old to Rock and Roll was supposed to be a play in theater.
Well, yes, it was written with the thought in mind that we might do something as a kind of a more traditional stage musical play. But that was just an initial thought. After about 3 or 4 weeks of working on it, we just decided to make it another record and go out and tour again, you know. So really, after about 75, I think that any ideas about getting involved in the conventional world of movies or theatres, they disappeared almost forever. I say almost because I have to go for a meeting in 2 weeks' time when I'm in Los Angeles to go and talk to some people from one of the big movie companies about writing music for a film.
Soundtrack, it's kind of...
Yeah, but hopefully that's...
Or about play a role in...
I don't think I would really want to try and do that, no.
You don't want to?
No.
Okay.
Not unless the money's right.
Yeah, and what about it? If the money is good...
If the money was really very, very good, I would say no.
No.
But thanks for asking.
Okay. What about A? A was supposed to be your solo album, and then you changed your mind and became a JETHRO TULL album.
Well, yes, because it started off being a solo album in which I invited 1 or 2 people to play with me on, but then we kind of ended up being a band again, and Martin Barr came to play a couple of guitar pieces, and then suddenly it was an album that was really not so different to perhaps Jethro Tull.
What about a
sounding
solo
group.
album? If you don't like movies, theater, what about a solo album? Is it interesting for you?
Well, it is, but it would have to be at the right time. I know Martin Barr is currently just, coming towards the end of making a solo album, which he even sings on. I spoke to him on the phone a couple of days ago, and he said he'd done the vocals on 2 of the tracks already. And so it'd be interesting to hear that.
What about you? Are you going to be a special guest in this album, or?
No. See, very sensibly, he didn't ask me, because if I was to do that, then it would be a bit too. Again, it would start to become too much like Jethro Tull. I mean,
it was better.
It's better to do these things very separately. So if perhaps next year, if Martin decides he wants to go out and do some concerts with his own group and promote that record, if he gets it released, then maybe at that time I would do a solo album. But if I did, I think right now what I would do is probably make an album of where the emphasis really was on me as a flute player.
As a flute player, okay. Do you consider, could you say that Jethro Tull it's your band? I think it's kind of solo thing. Or?
No, it's not like that. It's not like
you compose most part. You produce, you play guitar, you play flute, you sing. Could I say it's kind of solo?
Yeah, but when it comes to people in the studio or people on stage, I'm just 20% of it.
Okay.
So it's if we were a football team, then it would be it would be a very small football team, but we would be a team nonetheless. And for one person to go out there and try and take on 5 other guys wouldn't be very successful. So
for sure,
we need to be a team. We need to work together. And I don't think I would like the idea of being a solo performer, either just being by myself all the time, or indeed playing with some strange guys who just got paid a wage every week and didn't have their own limos. That wouldn't be any fun.
What about Crest of Knave? What's the pronunciation?
Crest of a Knave, yeah.
Crest of Knave. You won the Grammy of Best Metal Performance.
Well, it was actually, I think it was...
What was that?
It was hard rock, really, I think was the term.
Yeah, hard rock,
but whatever it was.
Metallica was competing as well. What do you think about that? What do you consider like Jethro Tull? Is it hard rock, is it progressive rock, or is it Jethro Tull special?
You would have to ask the 6,000 people who vote in the Grammy Awards as to why they thought Jethro Tull was a hard rock band. I mean, in America, I think you have to perhaps see Jethro Tull as being a little bit more known for the rock side of the music, whereas in Europe, Jethro Tull is known at least as much for the more acoustic, the more gentle side of things. So, but I think America's always seen Jethro Tull as more of a rock band. So certainly we would modify slightly the music that we play for an American tour. We would tend to lay more emphasis on the rock stuff and not do so many acoustic pieces.
This kind of
America.
folk. But don't you think that this is the main characteristic of your music, this union of folk and rock and roll?
Well, I think it's a union of a lot of different things. I mean, there's elements of blues and folk music and jazz and rock and, I mean, even what I suppose these days is called world music, at least some awareness of the music of different countries. But whether or not we're successful in putting that together into something that really is a meaningful kind of music on its own, I would doubt. I think Jethro Tull's biggest failing as a group throughout its career is that we are too eclectic. We try to draw on too many different influences. That's partly because there have been so many different people in the band, each of whom have had their own interests in music.
And it sounds the same band.
Well, I don't know. I think the band
it's
has
easy to listen to a song.
Deal.
Can be bluesy or can be wherever. Oh, this is Jethro Tull. It's quite easy to recognize that.
Well,
Besides
then maybe then we're more successful than I'm suggesting. But I think that we, in a musical sense, I would criticize what we do as being too eclectic, having too many influences. But that, on the other hand, stops us from becoming bored. There are lots of different things. I mean, I know if I sit down to write some songs, then I could write in over 3 days 3 pieces of music that are just completely, that just could never go on the same album together, would just sound so different. But I might enjoy all of them, and that's part of my undoubted charm and sophistication as a very warm and generous, loving human being. That's why I just love me. That's why I'm such a great guy.
Wow.
But having said that,
lucky.
I can see the things that are bad about Jethro Tull. I wouldn't want to go and see us play, because I would get irritated by the fact that things kept changing from one thing to another. It would be too overwhelming,
But nowadays, I think that the tendency of the music is exactly to get a lot of influence, not we are a heavy metal band, so we just play heavy metal. I think that this kind of elements.
Well, as a performing musician, take it from me, it's great to be in the position of playing lots of different things, and every piece is a little adventure of its own. But as a listener in the audience, I think I would find Jethro Tull's music too complex and too different, too.
Since the beginning, or
too
nowadays,
much
you think
contrast.
that?
Particularly now, because if you go to see Jethro Tull perform on stage, you're going to be subjected to 2 hours of total confusion. Because you're going to see things that are almost really mainstream traditional blues through to, hard rock or whatever you want to call it. Big sort of electric riffs, and you'll hear things that are almost classical music. You'll hear things that are sort of jazz, and it's just all too complicated. But they're all real parts of Jethro Tull's history, and I guess people like to hear them. I know I enjoy playing them, but I'm just saying I believe that we should have more of it. Would be better if we had more of a simple style. It would have been better and easier for people to like us. I think we would be much more successful in
30 million copies.
Yes, but that's over 25 years. That's only just over 1 million records a year. That's
it's quite a lot.
It's quite a lot, yeah.
And how can you explain that? Like the first album, this was like a success in 2 weeks. Went to number 5 on the British chart. How can I explain that? If you were so bad in the beginning, how could you become so good?
Because we got better very quickly.
But how that?
Well, because after about a month of playing, getting lots of gigs. We were then playing 5 or 6 nights every week, or 7 nights every week. So we got a lot of practice. So,
only in England, around England, or?
Yeah, just mainly around the south of England. But the thing was that we were playing to blues clubs of maybe 50 people or 100 people or maybe 200 people, but we played 6 or 7 nights every week for a period of 6 months, and so we began to win a lot of friends, a lot of fans who would travel around to see us. It later on happened, actually, in 1982. I got some tapes from a band, kept sending me tapes, to try and persuade me that they should be a support group for us, and they were terrible. They didn't sound very good at all. But after about the 3rd tape they sent me, it was kind of sounding a little better, so we gave them an opening slot on a festival that we did in England.
Which band was that?
They were called Marillion. And the same thing I noticed when they did this opening set. They really weren't too good. But there were about 200 people who had travelled from the south of England in a coach to see them play, who were real fans. And I just thought, we'll watch this group because they are winning fans in the very real sense of appealing as a live performing act. So it was a kind of interesting thing to see some 15 years after we started that still there was a possibility for a group to build a very strong following just by having character and personality on stage.
Without the media,
with absolutely no media, no promotion, and without even being very good at musically, just because they had that special something, but in a very live performing sense. So I think there's always a chance, even maybe now, for a band to still become really truly successful just because people like to see them play for real.
Live.
Yeah, live without any gimmicks or gadgets or production or laser beams or smoke machines or
like you in the beginning. People went to see you playing flute. It was kind of legend.
That's
by
right.
that time.
Yeah, that's what they
that guy.
That's right. In the beginning, that's what they used to do. Now, of course, they just come to see if it really is true that people can be as old as we are and still survive for 2 hours on stage without falling over.
Were you studying art as well in the college?
Briefly, yes.
Just briefly. you always thought about music?
Well, music is a little bit more immediate than painting. I mean, it's quicker to get there. It's also obviously more of a performance thing. I mean, you paint a picture, you paint it once, and that's it. It goes on the wall, or you set fire to it, or whatever. But you only do it once. Whereas the nice thing about music is if you get something that you like, you can make a record of it. That's like having the picture to put on the wall. But you also get to go out and paint it again each night on stage. And you can maybe paint it a little bit differently, you know, change the colors. Not maybe as many as these colors, but you know, you get to keep playing with that same painting night after night on stage. It evolves, it becomes a little different.
Do you usually try to make things change on stage, like you change the set list or you change your performance?
Some songs, yeah. I mean, certain things have a lot of... the arrangement of the music is such that you can make it different every night, but there are some songs that we would play almost the same every night. So it's different. Depends on the music, depends on the song.
What's the importance of the performance in rock and roll? Do you think that you have to have a good performance? Because you are one of the best performers in rock and roll, I think. What about this kind of performance? Do you think that a big band needs to have a great concert, or just you have to go there and play?
I think it becomes a strange kind of addiction to traveling, to performing in front of a real audience, to doing some things perhaps that you're also quite afraid of, because it is there are some aspects of, I mean, for instance, I mean, I don't like flying. I get very nervous sometimes flying,
right.
But that's what I have to do almost every day. So it's there is that, you know, that part of it, the coming up against a little bit of fear, a little bit of nervousness.
What about playing on stage? Do you feel still afraid and like that?
Not
10
really.
minutes before, do you feel nervous?
Not very often, but I think that there are times when intentionally we make it a little bit more more of a nervous atmosphere by going to new countries, places where where we've never played before, or maybe no one has ever played before. So that gets a little bit closer to how it was when we first started performing, in the sense that you go out to an audience and you've never seen them before, you don't know their country, you don't know their language, you don't know whether they've ever heard of Jethro Tull, or, you know, for all I know, I mean, if I go on stage in India next year, and there has not been a rock concert there for 8 years.
Like a lot of years.
So,
Many years.
you know, going to play in India next year will be a very interesting situation to see whether people actually know who we are.
What about your voice? You had some problems with your voice. 84. What happened? Like mine. What happened now? How do you feel about your voice? No more problems.
Oh yes, I mean, I think that the problem I have had is that never having really been singing has never been easy for me. It's always, as I said to you earlier, I began singing only because nobody else in the group could sing at all. So I became the singer, but I've always had to work very hard to try and sing anything. And it's not an easy job for me to do. It's not some people I know, they just open their mouth and
No
out
way.
comes pure gold, you know.
No way.
No, some people do. Listen, I mean, I was just with Jack Bruce a couple of weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, doing something in Germany, and I mean, he's older than I am, but he's just such a natural singer. And out of Jack Bruce's voice now, and this is a guy who's been through all kinds of terrible excesses, and yet he still has a fantastic voice. I saw him play live back in London just 2 weeks ago, and I mean, he was terrific. He was singing just really, really well, and it's just effortless for him to do it.
What were you doing with him?
He's a lucky guy, you know.
What were you doing with him? Nothing, or
Oh,
in German?
we both played on somebody else's record in Germany, and we were out doing a TV show.
Okay. As a producer, like the Broadsword and the Beast was the first album, Jethro Tull album, that wasn't produced by the band.
Yeah.
You call it like another. Why that? Why it took so long to?
Just to see if somebody else's influence and involvement would make any big difference. And the answer
Did
is
it?
made a little difference, but not a big one.
Why this guy from Paul Simon was with him from the Yardbirds, a band that wasn't playing anymore. Why did you call him?
Yeah, well, he had become a very successful producer in the years after the Yardbirds. I mean, Paul Samwell-Smith produced certainly many, if not most, of Cat Stevens' albums. and in fact, had produced a lot of people. I mean, worked with people like Carly Simon. I mean, he'd done a lot of production stuff, and even now has become, again, quite successful as a producer.
You told me.
I mean, that's really his job. He is a producer.
More than anything, he's a producer.
More than anything else, he's a producer. He's also a nice guy, an easy person to work with because he's not a prima donna. Some producers a little bit even more. They need an even bigger limo than the bass player. You know, so some producers can be a little difficult to work with. We have met a few producers, and I have spoken a number of times with. I'm very open to the idea of working with other people, but in all the discussions I've had with many different producers over quite a few years, it's never just kind of. We've never decided to make it happen, except on that one occasion with Paul Samuel Smith.
Okay, you told me that you got a lot of tapes from bands asking for opening your concert, and you're a producer as well. Have you ever listened to a tape and this band is good, I want to produce it? Or
yeah, well, I've been impressed by some people who sent me tapes, but usually the times that I am impressed by the tapes they've sent me, they already have a producer, or they already have made such a good piece of music that it wouldn't need me to help them. And if people send me tapes and they're not very good, then I'm well aware of the pain and the torture of trying to help people make good music out of bad music.
How can you help them to do it?
Well, the easiest thing would be just to put them out of their misery, shoot the buggers, because quite often the producer is expected to perform some magic trick, you know, to turn something, wave a magic wand, and it becomes...
And the music becomes...
Perfect, and that isn't possible to do. I mean, twice I've worked with other people. Once with Steel Eye Span, when I was asked to mix an album they'd already tried to produce themselves. And you can only do what you can do with the material that's there.
Mixing,
you know, you can make it sound a little bit more focused, but the music is theirs. That's it. So I didn't find that very satisfying, and I later produced or co-produced an album for Maddie Pryor, who's the singer in Steel Eye, a solo album she did. And I found that a very tiring experience, because many times in the making of that record, I just was so impatient. I just felt that it was much easier to go out and play the thing they were trying to do for them, or something she was struggling with singing. You know, you kind of just thought, oh God, you know, I'm going to be here all night while she goes over the same thing again and again and again. And I think the lesson that taught me was that I wouldn't want to put somebody else in the same position when I'm going through that as a performer, because there are times sometimes when you're in the studio and you really want to you know you can get it right, but you know it's going to take you many hours of work to get that special moment, that special performance you're looking for. And all the time you're sitting there, or you're working in the studio, and there's the producer, the engineer, the tape operator, you know, some of the road crew, the rest of the band, all sitting there going, oh God, he's still out there doing it. You know?
Yeah.
So for that reason, I decided about 10 years ago that I would work completely alone in the studio.
And you have your own studio?
Well, I built studios in London. But then I decided that I would rather just work at home. So I sold the studios in London and built a studio at home instead. So I could just work from home, and I could operate the equipment and do what I had to do. So you are
the producer, and what kind of bands go there? Only JETHRO TULL?
Right. I even make the coffee.
You even make the
I even make the coffee, yeah. And I clean the studio. And,
everything.
And no one can tell me that, you know, it's time to start work or finish work.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's just me.
Do you have bands in there, or?
No. It's just me.
Only.
Except, I mean, when I'm working with the rest of the guys, usually we go to Martin's or Dave's studio to record when everybody's playing. But then the parts where I'm doing my vocals or mixing, production, mastering, that sort of thing, I can just be by myself and work alone.
You spend a lot of time at home. Changing about the subject, you sold so far more than 30 million records.
So they say,
yeah, that's what they say. 30 million. Am I right?
Well, I only got
I
only got paid for 29 million of them.
Okay, the only 1 million. So, which is your favorite record in JETHRO TULL career, in all the JETHRO TULL career?
Do you mean which favorite album?
Yeah, your favorite album, the one that you still listen to it and you like it.
Well, if I had to have a favorite album, then I would, like most people, I would be looking for a little bit of lots of different things. I would probably look for the album that will be released in about a month's time, or a little more than a month from now. Well,
best of.
towards the end of May. It's a 2 CD set of digitally remastered Jethro Tull songs from the beginning to now.
Is it
but
the box?
It's a good mixture.
Are you talking about the box?
No, the box set is a
4 CD.
different item. That's a 4 CD set that comes out in a few weeks, a very few weeks. But that's too expensive for most people.
So you're releasing now
It's-
the best of, kind of the best of Jethro Tull in the career?
Well, yes. I mean, it's a definitive best of the 2 CD set, which is 36 songs. So that gives you a good introduction to Jethro Tull's music. Or maybe if you have all of Jethro Tull's albums on vinyl, and you don't want to go out and buy all of them again on CD, which could be, very, very hazardous to your health and your bank balance, then you could at least buy a nice little collection of it all in a 2 CD set.
Did you chose the songs in these CDs?
Yeah, so I had more to do with it than most people, but we took a lot of advice from radio stations, from the fans and
as well. Fan club, like they ask for something.
yeah, they sort of all wrote in listing their favorite 40 songs, and you try and take into account what everybody tells you, and then just come up with what you think is a good balance.
It's fair enough.
An entire album. I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's absolutely true. I found an entire album's worth of material, which I thought was lost. I mean, I just had no idea we had it. I found 3 24-track, 2-inch tapes of an album that we tried to record between Thick as a Brick and Passion Play in 1972. And I'd found some of it a few years ago. I found 1 reel of tape and took some bits that were on the 20 years box set. But I found another 3 reels of tape. So we're going to release the whole of that Missing Jethro Tull album.
Missing Jethro Tull,
which is
sounds good.
But it doesn't contain. It wasn't complete. It wasn't finished. You see, it was like about 2/3 done. So there are some vocals on it, and then other pieces of music with no vocals. So for those, I decided rather than to try and write some lyrics and sing them now, 20 whatever years later, would be a little strange. So I decided what I would do to make them listenable, so at least you could hear them as pieces of music, because I knew what the melody would be. So I played them as flute instrumentals.
The flute instead of the vocal.
Yeah, so it's kind of half vocal, half instrumental is how it ends up. So that's 1 CD, is the unreleased Jethro Tull album, which was found after all those years. It's not great, but it's a good piece it's a good piece of 70s slightly crazy music. It's from a historical point of view, it's quite a good bit of 70s music.
How could
if
you
like
forget
that sort
about
of
that?
stuff.
How could you forget about that? So many tapes.
So many tapes, yeah. I mean, if you put all the Jethro Tull tapes, you wouldn't be able to walk around in this room if you put all the tapes.
Really, many tapes.
Absolutely, just huge numbers of tapes.